Um, this particular session, we're going to talk about a job log, and hopefully, you know what that is. So we're going to start out with just a list of the agenda. Not going to read this whole thing here, but this is what we're going to be going through, the purpose of it, and then we'll talk a bit about the various details and do a little bit of digging in there to show some examples. So, what is the purpose of a job log and its friends? Because in the IBMI world, everybody has friends. Um, IBMI has one of the best abilities to track what's happening with jobs of any platform that I've ever worked with. Um, I mean, if you have problems in Windows, for example, one of my Windows workstations this morning rebooted, great, that was useful. You go in there and it says, "Oh, there was a kernel problem." Okay, uh, not very useful, right? IBMI has a tremendous amount of capability here, and so we're going to go through the what is in these various components, especially the friends of the job log, and then we'll talk about the job log itself. So the first friend is the system history log. All right, and the history log is one log for the entire system. Right, so not a single job. You can find out what's going on the whole system here. It's time stamped. It's read only. There is no facility in any way for modifying or deleting anything from the history log except for trimming off the end of the log. Okay. You can't take some stuff in the middle and find, ooh, I did a bad thing. I'm going to delete those rows. No, that's not a thing. Some of the stuff that's in there is the start and stop of every job, right? There's CPI messages in there that say this job started, and then there's one that this job ended. Those are recorded for every job. One of the useful things I find in there is the objects that are saved during backups. And that one can be really, really handy. And especially when we talk to customers that might want to move into our cloud or might want to consider, or maybe are looking at a new system. How long does my backup take? How much stuff am I backing up? You can look in the history log and just look for the messages that indicate what's been saved. Excuse me. And that will log for every library when the start of the save was, or when the end of the save was for that library, and how many objects were saved. So you can subset the log and find that very quickly. And you can do that as easily as using the display log command or using SQL. You can also find lock failures in there. This or that thing couldn't obtain a lock, so it was unable to process. You can also see in there things like, okay, my audit journal, I got a new receiver attached, that gets logged in there. You can say users connecting to and signing on to ODBC jobs, for example. So a lot that's in there. And generally, you're not going to just jump in there and look this afternoon to see what's going on. You usually go in there with a purpose. Now, the second friend to the job log is the QSysOpera message queue. And this is one of those things, if you have to ask what QSysOpera is, again, you're probably in the wrong presentation because QSysOpera has existed since the beginning of OS 400 time. And that is the queue where most of the messages that need a response and a lot of other messages as well get dumped in there. Some of the things in here are um, both in QSysOpera and QHIST. Some are in only one or the other. And of course, in QHIST, there's no, you can't answer a message in QHIST. You could see some of them that have been answered, but they don't show up in there to accept an answer. It's very simple to send messages to QSysOpera. So some of you will have code that you've written perhaps that says, such and such a task is completed. Now it's okay to do another next task. We see those kind of things in there. We see debug messages in there. And to be fair, there's often a lot of clutter in QSysOpera. Sometimes it's just crazy. And so it's really hard to try and keep track of it. So typically you're going to use some kind of a tool to watch that. That might be an Itheon or a Halcyon or some other tool that's used to monitor that queue, because you may have messages in there that you want to answer, but you didn't see them because there was, so much other clutter in there. Um, we have a question. Is there an SQL method from Navigator to view the job log year? When I use my SQL script, I'm limited to a 24-hour period. I would have to say there must be a way to do that. I think it's some formatting of the SQL, I'm going to guess. Um, I have used the SQL bits in Navigator. Um, it's also possible that that needs to be done in ACS, run SQL scripts instead, because in there we know we can select any date range that still exists in the log. One thing about QSys Opera, though, you can clear that dude, right? And when you do that, if you clear QSys Opera, then any message in there waiting for a response will be responded to with the default response. So you may unfortunately answer some messages that you didn't want to um, in that case. All right. The next friend, number 3, is the system audit journal. Now, the audit journal is one of my favorite things because I sell disk. And if you get that joke, you know that you can tune the audit journal to write so much stuff so fast that you almost can't have enough disk. So tuning the audit journal to display the systems, the events that you need is important. Journaling too much stuff, again, is just going to generate a flood of information. And again, if you don't have tooling that can monitor that for you, or at the very least report on it, then pouring in, millions and millions of entries in there just isn't all that useful. It's not as friendly as some of the other things are for finding a job, though. So the system audit journal really is about things that are happening again on the whole system. And those things might be authority failures, it might be logging in, it might be password failures, all of that kind of thing that you can see in there. And that may be relative to you finding, hackers, for example, nefarious activity, or maybe you've got some jobs you set up and you didn't give the users the right authority to that. So usually you can find out a lot there, but not so much really tracking a job. But altogether, these tools help us figure out what happened with the job and hopefully why a thing might have happened with a job. So, what is a job log then? A job log, not unexpectedly, every now and then IBM names something pretty well. It's a log of all the messages issued by a job. Great, that was useful, wasn't it? Um, Effectively, as the job starts, okay, it's going to be it's going to issue a CPF 1124, and that's the message that you can find in QHIST that says this job started, right? And then at the end of that job log, when the job finally completes, it should have a CPF 1164. And in that 1164, there's actually some performance data. It'll tell you how much CPU time the job used while it was running. So that can be a useful thing if you're looking at upgrades or you're trying to figure out performance issues. This will give you a little bit of an inkling of how much CPU a particular job takes. Importantly, a job log tells a story. So from the top to the bottom, chronological order, this thing happened, then this thing happened, then this thing happened. And so it's telling a story of what's going on. When you read a typical job log, you might see things like, hey, the open of this file was changed to sequential. Why would it do that? Oh, I'm reading the thing sequentially. Oh, okay, cool. You might see messages in there that, a particular object doesn't exist. Well, that's bad, right? Well, no, it could very well be that the program that was running looked to see if the object existed, and finding that it wasn't there, that was the right answer. Because maybe you want to make sure that a process didn't get interrupted and leave an object laying there. So you'll see all sorts of that sort of thing. Now, the job log itself can be produced at multiple levels. What that means is how much detail, okay? How much stuff do you want to record in the log versus just ignore, okay? So messages within the jobs, each message has a level from 00, which is pure informational, up to 99, which is I've stopped and I'm waiting for an answer, okay? So IBM has scaled each of the messages and says, okay, informational, a little important, more important, kind of important, really important, all the way up to 99. I'm waiting on a message. So we're waiting for a response. So we can filter those and say, okay, we don't really care about these low ones, or maybe we do care, that sort of thing. When you to override that, and we'll see this in a minute, but you can override that on the submit job command. So whether you're doing that, keying that thing manually, which is pretty rare, or whether you're putting that in a job scheduler or putting that into a program, you can override on the submit job command. You can also do that with the change job command itself. Um, and of course, the default comes out of the job description. So to make a job log useful, we got to have data. It's really hard with any computer mission to do a good job if you don't have any data. So that job log, as we mentioned, you can dial that thing from, nothing at all. And some vendor packages do that. That can be very frustrating because you have a job that's erroring out and you have nothing to back it up. That's akin to somebody opening a ticket on the help desk that says, my computer's broke. Okay. Would you care to tell me what part is broke? I mean, something, right? So that's what happens with the job log. When you get nothing in there, it's not very useful. As we mentioned, there's a variety of places to configure it, and there are also some limits that we can take because you can write too much to the job log. So let's talk about how do we control that detail. So the first controls are in system values. There is a system value queue job message queue max. What in the world is that? Well, that says that when a job starts, it gets a job log, and this is in memory, right? What's the maximum size of that job log? How big can it get before I have to take an action? And way back in the day when the paint was white, I like to say, the system was called an AS400 back then. We very often had this value quite small. It might only be, 4 or 8 megabytes because RAM was expensive and rare. The first AS400 I worked on had 4 megabytes of RAM. Not a lot. It was so small, IBM finally went, that's kind of small. We're going to give you 4 more. Today, the smallest Power 10 I can sell you, I think, has to have 64 gigabytes of RAM in it. So having 64 megabytes assigned to a job log as the maximum is probably a good choice, right? Go ahead and let it get up to 64 megs. Most won't get anywhere near that, by the way, not even close, but can grow that way. Now, the next one is, what do I do when the job log is full? Queue job message queue full. Well, I got 3 choices. My first option is wrap, which says, okay, I've started writing at the top of the job log. I hit whatever the size limit was, if it's 64 meg. Then I just simply go to the top and I start writing again. I just write right over top. Okay. So I will only then ever have available the last 64 meg in that case of the job log. If you have it set to a lower number, it'll be less. So you'll have less detail to be able to mine. And the next option is print and wrap. This is Larry's favorite because even though it doesn't actually print it, it creates an job log with that first block of data. So if I set it at 64, it'll create a several thousand page job log, and then it will start over. And if you keep wrapping, and you've probably seen this, um, if you've been on the platform for any long period of time, you'll see a job that has 7 or 8 or 9 or even 10 or 15 job logs. And you realize, oh, that's just segments of the job log, right? Every 64 megs or whatever the job message queue max size is set at. So it's a thing to know. I like the print wrap because then you don't lose that detail. That's important. No wrap, though. No wrap is not my favorite. I do not like it. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like no wrap because what that says is, uh-oh, job log full, terminate the job. And for those of you that are system admins, if you've ever done a recovery where you're restoring from a tape to an empty system, whether that's a migration or whether it's a DR test or something, and your system value is set to queue job message queue full of no wrap, and you're in the middle of restoring the 57th library on the system, and all of a sudden, doink, you're sitting at a sign-on screen. And you go, what happened there? Well, the restore job ran out of job log, and so it ended. Oops. So those of us that do this all the time, one of the very first things we do when we're starting a recovery is change the queue job message queue max to 64 and the action to print wrap. Because losing, having to start your restore, you don't really have to start over, but it's a big pain in the butt, right? The next one is queue spool file action. And what this says is at the end of a job, when the job is done, what do I do with my spooled files? And the two in there are keep and detach. Ignore that comment about part two. This is actually part of a all-day seminar that I do sometimes. Keep says the job control block lives on and the spool files are attached to that job control block. That means I can find them with work job, work submitted job, work user job, those kind of things. If I say detach, then the spool files are disconnected from the job. And so for the job log, I would find that with the work job log command because work job and such won't find them because there's no more job. You let that go away by setting spool file action to detach. Now, setting the level, right? It's important to understand how to dial this up and down. Some customers, it just does make sense. Dial it all the way up to 11. Oh, 10 now. We're on power 10. Dial it all the way up to 10. Maximum logging, and just do it on every job. There's not enough performance hit to worry about. And that way, when I have an issue, I can look. All right. Some of you, though, you might be running a massive number of jobs and you go, I just can't afford that amount of overhead. So I want to control it a little bit better. So the log and the log CL program parameters are the two that we play with here. The log one is the key. And what that says in 3 parts. So you see there in the example for maximum logging, the first one is what's the logging level? Okay, 0 to 4. 0 being the least, 4 being the maximum. Then there's the severity. And what severity says is how high does the message severity have to be to get included in the job log? You can see that 99 is the highest value, so any message that requires a response is going to be um, um, included. You can't not include those guys. But you can go all the way to 00, and which is generally where I like to run it because I like to see all the messages. But if you know a particular job stream generates a whole lot of messages that are severity 10 and you just don't care about those, you can set the thing to severity 20, and now you filter out all that stuff, and it goes away. Then the text, what that's saying is, when I write to the job log, how much stuff do I write to the job log? That is the output file that it generates as a printer output or work job log. Star message says I'm only going to see the first level text. So if you're familiar with IBMI and messages, you got a message that says, you know, this many objects were saved to this from this library. That's the first level text. If you put your cursor on there and you hit an F9, you get the detail, right? And the detail says, and I saved this library, there were this many things, and there's a whole lot more text behind that. That's the second level text or second level message text. Again, my favorite here is star second level because that tells me I want to see the message and the second level stuff behind that. I want to see all that. Does it produce a longer job log? Sure, but it's virtual anyway. You're not probably going to print the critter, so let's don't break it or mute the good knowledge that you could have there. Now, what is no list? No list says if the job completes normally. So I ran a job, doesn't matter what the job is, it did its thing, and the last program in the stack did a return, we're done. No list says don't write this job log. No harm, no foul. Everything went as planned. Don't care to review that. So when you say message or second level, that tells the system that when the job ends, write a job log and picks the detail level. And then no list says, in the case of a successful completion, I don't want a job log. If it's an unsuccessful completion, then you'll get second level. Okay. And then logcl program is just a simple yes/no switch. I happen to love that for some jobs. One of the ones that I work on fairly frequently is startup programs and also backup programs. For the most part, I'm not a programmer anymore. I used to be. Susan Gantner took away my RPG card. Nope, you are the MQC. You must not program in RPG anymore. And so I do CL. Well, if you say log CL program yes, you will see every CL command that can be logged gets written into the job log, which can be really handy when you're trying to debug things like a startup job. We have a question in the Q&A that says, is there any scenario where no wrap would be useful? I would say no. I don't know. Um, I very much don't like jobs getting clobbered out of the blue, which is kind of what happens when the job log fills up. All of a sudden, why did that job end? I don't know. Let's go look in the job log. Oh, look, job log filled up. So I don't know. I suspect, and there are certain parameters over the life of this platform, it's been around 36 years, um, where there's been an option that was created way back in the beginning to prevent things from running out of disk. Remember, we used to do things like delete history log entries and clear job logs and get back 5, 6, 8, 10% of disk. Now, I challenge you to do your best cleaning up, not counting journal receivers, and even make the system get 1% smaller, less full. So I would posit that no wrap is just not really a good option. So if you take the knowledge that we gained here, what you'll see is that maximum logging is 4. So highest level here, 0, 0, filter out nothing. Second level is what I want to see on every output. And logging CL program statements, I want yes. So that's going to be the maximum logging you can get. And then minimum logging is 00, 0, right? So buckshot, no list. You're not going to get a log ever. You just said I don't care. I want write 0. Um, you know, no filtering because there's nothing to write, and log CL program of no, right? And you get absolutely positively nothing in that scenario. So, and there could be a scenario you want that. Maybe there's some jobs that you need to run that way. Now, setting the level for a given job. So the hierarchy of assigning that level works like this from low to high, with each overriding the previous if it is specified. So the first thing is it takes the job description that was used, and in that job description, there's going to be values for logging and log sale program. That's where it starts with whatever's in there. Then, if the job was submitted by a submit job command, and obviously this is only batch jobs, and you specified data in the job in the log parameter other than the default, because the default says star job D. All right. So if you specify something in there, that will override the job description. Okay. Then the highest level is the change job command within the job. So a couple of things about that. For example, when I write a startup program, I don't want to allow somebody to run it at a lower logging level. So the very first command in there is your mon message CPF 0000, right? The next command is change job log 40 second level. I want the max. I need to have that in there. Um, and so I don't care what you set the submit job parameter. I don't care what you set for the job D. It's going to max log. The other thing that you can do with change job in the program itself is you could have a segment of the job where you say, look, right in here, it's going to just generate an absolute flurry of messages that don't mean anything. So rather than clog up tens of thousands of pages of shmoo, I'm going to change my logging level really low right here. And then when this is done, I'm going to change it back to another level. So you can actually do that on the fly. And I don't actually mention it in here, but the actual highest level is if a job is running, you can go to work with active jobs or use the change job command if you know the job name, and you can change the logging level on the fly. Obviously, it only affects from that point forward, but you can change the logging level for a job even while it's running. And you do have to have job control special authority to do that. And then a final note, when you sign off, most of you either take option 90 on the menu or you just key sign off and you smash enter, right? If you do sign off and hit F4 though, you'll note there's parameters in there. In one of those, you can actually say star list, which will create a job log for your job. If you don't say star list, it's like ending the job normally. So if you have star second level, you'll get a log. But if it's set at star no list, then you won't get a job log unless you specify star list at sign off. That's a handy one, by the way, if you're doing a recovery and okay, I've got the system all restored and now I want to sign off the system. Do a sign off star list so that you have a record of what was restored. So how do I change a job description? Well, if you're in Navigator for um, you can navigate to work management, then job descriptions, or you can use the search function. Okay. In a search function, that thing is very powerful. So you don't have to know how to navigate. You just need to know what you're looking for. And you'll come up with a list of the job descriptions. Then you right click on it, right? And here you can see that we're changing a job description. The level we're setting to 4, the severity we're putting at 0. And then here, instead of those asterisk things, right, one of the beauties of the web interface is they can put actual text behind that. And it says, I would like to see the message text and the message help in the job log. So that's your star second level. Okay, so that's what you're getting when you do that. And then log CL programs is right below there. And I hit the drop down and said, yes, I would like that. Okay. In the command line, you can do work job D or change job D, and it looks like that. Um, Again, the parameters are very consistent within change job D, change job. Um, the log and the log CL program is exactly the same format. I have a question in the chat says, what would you likely see in an interactive job log? In there, you're going to see every command that you typed. Right? So you'll see I typed in this, I typed in that, display job, work active job, work spool file. You'll see all of those commands in there. You'll see any message that were issued for that. So, um, and one of the things, as an example in my history with this platform, I was an IT director, and one of the guys that worked in our customer service was actually a buddy of mine going all the way back to kindergarten. We used to be the champions of tetherball, if you remember that. We were the two tallest kids in class. And he texted me using the send message thing on the display. Hey, new guy over here is keying commands, and it doesn't look like he knows what he's doing. Turned out the guy was a former operator on a system, and so he was keying all these trying to do things, and of course he kept getting, sorry, you're not authorized, sorry, not authorized. So we played a little game on him, and you know created a user profile called qsyssecmon, signed on as that, and then sent him a break message. The system security monitor has determined you have entered an exceedingly large number of commands to which you are not authorized. Your boss has been notified. And I actually copied his boss on the thing, who came to me and said, "What are you talking about?" Because this is right. But you'll see all those commands. So, if you don't want to get busted, and that guy ended up quitting a few days later. He was not a right fit for the job, but um, he never did do anything actual bad, which is good. Um, okay, another question in the chat. We have many connections in Q user work, and they end up going into job log pending. Why does that happen? Actually, that's a good thing, because what job log pending says is I can find those job logs in work job log. If I hit F4, I want to type of star pend or pending jobs. That means that it didn't waste time actually generating an output queue entry. It didn't create a spooled file. Okay. And so you're saving system resources, and that's easier to clean them up. And you can still look at them, and you can still tell it to print if you'd like. But that's what job log pending means in that case. Um, do you prefer green screen or Navigator for looking at job logs? I'm going to reserve that question for a minute because we're going to see it, and then you'll kind of get my opinion there. All right, so let's move ahead. Um, how do I change an active job? Well, I got to find the thing, and so I go to work management. I find the job in active jobs, and remember there's subsetting in there. So once I've found the job I want to change, you'll see there's a whole stack of tabs on the left. I'm very glad that they put those tabs on the left and didn't try to push them across the top. But I just go down to the job log parameter, and here I go. Do I want to keep messages in the job log? Um, what's my logging level? And then what's my message severity level? And then what do I do at the end of the job? Right? So create printer output or print the message cause and the recovery. So this is the do I do is it going to be pending, or is it actually going to create a job log? Um, and then the button C there, I can actually view the live job log for this job from here. Okay. So let's talk about reading a job log. So this is what you see when you're in Navigator for I and you look at a job log. And it should be pretty obvious pretty quickly that this is my favorite view, because you can do so much in here with the view. So I'm in here and I can see this particular job. Okay, here's where it started. Now you need to recognize that if you're looking at a job log on the green screen, it's going to be oldest to newest. When you're looking at it in Navigator, it's going to be newest to oldest. So the last thing I had done in this particular situation was I had key to work submitted job. So the question earlier, what do you see in an interactive job? This is an interactive job right here. Okay. So if we start at the bottom, I can see that, I signed on at this date and time. I can see that it gave me that message, which I'm sure all of you have seen 1,000 times, that your message queue is allocated to another job because you signed on more than one terminal. Then I key to work spool file. I key to work job description entry, or job schedule entry, sorry. Then I submitted a job. So from the job scheduler, I submitted a job, and it tells me that I ran this 039 da, 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 job scheduler, or job was submitted to QBatch. And then this format, okay, well, how do I get star system slash send message? Well, if you do system request and you get that message choice, send message is behind there. So anytime you do system request 6, for example, that's display queue sysopper. That's why you get that. That's how you get that format in there. The command that you ran by doing system request 6 is logged, okay, in your interactive job. In this case, I did send message. That's not what I wanted to do. So I get a CPF 6801 command prompting ended. You pressed F12. You didn't do anything. Okay. So you can see that in some cases, it's not all that useful, but you can definitely go back and say, aha, I never did send that message, did I? I hit F12 instead. So this is just um, a simple a list. Now, what can I do in here? I can destroy time by sorting by message ID. I could sort by the type, by the severity, sort by the message. If you click on these columns, you can sort them. And of course, then your messages are not in um, time, date, order. But I can, of course, go back to the sent and resort the job queue, job log. And even if you like it, you could click on the sent right at the beginning and flip the sort and put that oldest message at the top if you'd like. You also do get boxes on the side here, and you get options for that, which, for example, will allow you to say, I want to see the detailed message behind that CPC 1221. I want to see that help text behind it. Now, this is the green screen. And so, isn't this just kind of more calming and normal than this? I mean, yeah, some of you, like me, have been using a green screen for, okay, a lot of years. And it's normal, but it's still kind of harsh. It really is still kind of harsh. But if you're on a message and you hit F1, then you get the second level text. So you can see all these messages in here. But if I hit F1, I'll get the detail behind those messages. Okay. Um, when I'm in the SQL view, okay, how many of you didn't know you could look at a job log in SQL? I'm gonna guess some of you didn't know that. But you should never bet against SQL. It's like betting against the house, right? You don't bet against the house. So SQL, so many things you can do in there now, and if you can't do it today, Scott and his team are probably working on it so you can do it tomorrow. But here you can see I used SQL, and it primarily looks like the Navigator for iView, but Navigator for I has a pre-selected set of columns for you to look at, whereas SQL job log view, I get to see a whole boatload of columns, and many of which I don't even care about, but they're there. Okay. Um, in fact, you can include the second level text and everything. So this is that same job. So you can see the job started, message queue is allocated to another job. You see the work spool file, work job scheduler entry. See, I submitted that job. There's my send message and the fact that I pressed F12, and there's my queue display queue sysopper. So same exact job log, message timestamp, and of course it's SQL. So you can subset. You can say, I don't care about messages with a severity of 0 over here. Maybe I only want to see 50 and up. Um, but you can do all the things that you can do with SQL, right? Sort it in any sequence, um, etc. Um, now, jobs with pending job logs, if you have spool file action of detach, prevents SQL from seeing those because SQL can't see them if they're pending. This is the actual SQL command I ran, and you'll be able to copy and paste that right out of the presentation. Obviously, you need to substitute your job name in here. Okay. So understanding that detail level, there's a million scenarios. We talked a bit about the old machines, using up a lot of disk space and all that, but For the most part, I look at these two settings, second level or no list, and I really like second level for the most part. I totally understand if you've got jobs that have been running for years that run flawlessly all the time and you just don't have issues with them and you want to run no list, absolutely fine. Um, but there's certain things that you really should log 100%, and those include backup jobs and startup jobs because you don't get a chance to run your startup job very much. So you want to be able to make sure that you're able to debug that thing if needed. And everybody likes to be comfortable with their backup, right? Did it do everything correctly? Do I have the message? Because it's so critical. 4,280 things were saved from Prod Data Lib. One thing was not saved. Really? What's the one thing? Well, maybe it's a data area that hasn't been used in 20 years and it's damaged or something. But maybe it's the control file that has next invoice number, next order number, next this or that. Whoops, that could be really critical in the case that you had to restore the system. So you want to have that detail available, right? Um, the difference, obviously, between these two, though, is that it's second level says produce a job log every time. No list says only produce a job log when there's an error. Okay. Um, if there's no error, just throw the thing away. So further understanding of the detail. And some of these things you learn the hard way. So I did a lot of work for a customer here in West Michigan for many years. Great company. Unfortunately, now out of business. They were in retail and the internet sort of clobbered them. But one of the pieces of software that they used as a key piece of their business did a lot of receive message. And if you're a CL programmer, you understand receive message a bit at least. You can say when there's a message, I want to receive that message so I can process it. I want to do a thing with it, right? One of the parameters in receive message is what do I do with the message that I've received? I could leave it in there so I can still see it, or I can remove it from the job log. And that software was doing the remove from a job log. Remove message star yes. What that meant was the job logs, even though they were all there, they were missing stuff. And so debugging things was really frustrating because you wouldn't see the detail in the job log. The received messages were in there, pulling those out and hiding them from you. Now, I don't believe the software vendor was doing that on purpose. I don't think that they had any nefarious, oh, I don't want other people to be able to work on this. I think the whole point was by receiving them out of the job log, it removes the clutter and the customer doesn't see that there was errors. And they might not have even been errors. It might have been received message that I checked for an object existence. And then I received a message and says, oh yeah, take it out. Yeah, object doesn't exist. Good. Take the message out. So that could be frustrating. And you don't get to change the program if the received message was compiled with yes. So that's a challenge. Um, but it can be very frustrating in that scenario. So if you are looking at an application package job log and you're frustrated that stuff's missing, that's probably what it is received messages happening, and it's getting pulled out of the job log. So here's a job log thing I want to use as a little bit of an example. A message exists in QSysOpera about something that failed. Bummer. Okay. And the message is super clear. CPF 9999 received by XAC 700 at 5100. CDIRR. Well, of course we do a C, right? Because C's continue. Oh, wait. C's cancel. Right. Unfortunate that that's the same initial, but it is cancel and it has been canceled since the beginning of OS 400 time, and probably back to the System 38. So first we need to know the job in question. So we can open system operator messages in Navigator for I, and we can display that message, and there it is, inquiry message from LDB that the CPF 9999 occurred, And it's a severity 99. As we mentioned, a severity 99 is a message that's waiting for an answer. Okay, so we got a CPF 9999, um, and it happened at this date and time. So now we're going to go to properties on that message, and we can see that's the message help, right? That second level text there. Okay. And we see that the control language program with that name, it's in this library, detected an error at statement 5100. Okay. The message text for the error is function check unmonitored by XAC 701. Okay. So a different program. And it was at statement 6600. Okay. So now I have a little bit more detail. All right. And I can look in the detail here and I can see that the error was level 99. This was the actual job name. It was user LDB night save SA2T, and there's the job number for the thing. Okay. And the actual program throwing the error is this guy. Okay. So I got that all from this SQL, right? Selecting the message type and the severity from this job. Okay. So now I've got the job log. In Navigator for I can also find it by clicking the subset button, right? Select the detailed column and enter the value message. Cool. So it's going to find all of the ones where the status says message. Quick way to find that. Okay. There's my job, and I can go in. And as we mentioned before, once you see anything that has a checkbox over here, now I can go to actions and I want to go see my job log. So two different ways to get my job log and have that visible. So here's the view from SQL. And again, remember, SQL is going to show oldest to newest. Okay. Navigator for I is typically going to be the other way around. Um, and so here I've got all the stuff, job started, et cetera, call the, day save week, with tape 01. We're going to call this delete DLYDATER program, and unfortunately, this is what you see when there are parameters. The call had parameters. I wish it could tell us what those were, but it doesn't. I run a few commands, and then I call program XAC 700, and I call XAC 701. I run a check obj. I do some other steps here. But I finally get to this point where it does display tape of tape 01, and what it's looking for there is it's looking for a tape file called It's Not On There, specifically looking for an empty tape, right? That's how we find an empty tape, is look for something that's never going to be there. If somebody were to save a file called It's Not On There, um, it would if it found that, it would think the tape was empty. But I got a CPF 6760 here. Tape now not ready. Aha. We've learned a thing. The tape wasn't ready. Somewhere along the line, though, somebody entered a C to cancel that. Or was it continue? No, it's definitely cancel. Well, now that bubbled up because this was XAC 701. So now XAC 700, the calling program, okay, gets a function check that says this instruction at statement 6600 failed. Okay. And so now I've got it bubbled up. I want to find out who entered this C. This is a fairly common question. Hey, um, the I've got to have I want to know who canceled that thing, right? Who did it and ran? That's not very nice. If I look at the old school printed job log, okay, it's the kind of thing that you would see in an old school job log. This is not the same job here, but you can see that things are being retrieved. So here's the navigator for I, and this is the view we're going to use going forward. Again, you'll see this is newest to oldest. So this is all the same stuff that was in here. Okay. But it actually just is easier to read too, easier on the eyes. Um, but you can see the last thing that happened, CPF 9999, right? Sender's copy, function check, escape. Here's that C that we're looking for. Who did that? Right? We can read the whole, read this, but we're looking for who did that C. So how do we find the issue? Um, the error is most likely the last thing in the job log. We can think about that because it's waiting on a message. So we're pretty comfortable that, this view from Navigator for I with the oldest or the newest message on top is probably the right answer. So that's good logic there. Um, and again, that's why iNav does it that way. So let's look at the properties for these messages. So here's the CPF 9999. Well, the CPA 0701 that is calling out the CPF 9999. I can go to actions here and pick properties. Okay. So now there's the message. There's the from user, the thread. Okay. Don't care about that. Sender's copy, date and time. Okay. This program and all of this is the stuff about that job, right? It's the top level message. Okay. We can already see that the messages replicate or referencing a previous message. So let's give that one a look. Right. So now we move back and we see again, now this is the 9999 message, date and time and all that. And it calls out the program, calls out the statement. So we could pull that program up and see what's happening there. But the unexpected part is why it threw the CPF 9999. There was no mon message there that says if you get that CPF 6760, do a thing. So since the system wasn't instructed what to do, it throws up the message. So if we keep looking for that guy, we find the CPF 6760, which is what is being reflected. Program and statement again. Here's our message. Here's the second level stuff. That C, that's all along the job log. Yeah, that's that guy we're looking for. Okay. So the mystery C is from user LDB. Okay. It's the only bit in the message, but the date and the time as well as the user who answered it. That's the whole message, right? The entire text is a C, but it's this LDB guy. All right. We found him, right? He went in there and he put a C in, and we know exactly when he did it, 10/11/34, okay, PM on 9/5. He took that C. So we've tracked that statement down. Okay. Um, Now there was a bug in there, just so you're aware. Um, and if you're current on PTFs, this should be gone. But there, in fact, was an error where it was always displaying the user ID from the job, so you could get away with it. If you looked in the green screen, though, you saw that it said LDB3. I answered it from a different profile, but in Navigator, it was still showing LDB at that point. Like I say, this has been corrected, but it will actually reflect the person who answered it, whereas initially it was showing the user from the job log, whoever ran the job, which of course doesn't help you any. So it does exist, the error. And again, the truth is revealed because now we find out that, it was that LDB3 and that did it. And the real truth was digging one level down. We find that the tape drive was not ready. And we had already figured that out, right? So, couple more things. I've been showing you the general tab on the messages. To the right, I do show the entire message, right? So there's a lot of message help in there. If you select that message help when you do your SQLs, it just makes it such a ginormous statement. So it's kind of nice to be able to look at in the Navigator for iView. You can just go look at that separately. And we also do see the from and to programs in there, right? So here's the from and the to. So this is from program QTAERR to XAC701. That's that C that was passed into that program. Okay. So all of the detail is in there. And when you start working with that a little bit and you start understanding what's going on there, you can really do a good job of detailing what's going on in that job and tracking down who did it and what is it that they did. So other uses in there, besides tracking down failures, you can identify messages that appear frequently. I've had it already. You go into Navigator Fry and you sort by message ID. They go, why do I get this same message 100,000 times in this job, Mike? Is there a way I can not have it generate that message, for example? But use the sorting and the filtering and that kind of thing to ferret that out. Because just having a ginormous job log isn't all that valid, um, unless you need all of that. Unless there's stuff in there that you need. Maybe you need to count it for statistics. I don't know. Um, Normally, sorting the job log doesn't help if you're trying to solve a problem. You want it in date and time sequence, so be careful about that. But there's other times when you're looking for stuff in a job log that's not related to a problem per se, where sorting it could be useful. SQL, you can also do that. Um, you can use this guy here, and that will then generate, the message queue name, who was the user. So in this case, it literally finked out, there's the reply, and it came from LDB3. Okay, so SQL statement right here. Okay, and we found the guy with SQL. Same, right? Probably found it faster, right? And it even shows the job that LDB3 did it from. So he's on an interactive job. Okay. All right. Differences between active versus completed job. An active job is the most interesting, of course, but it can be sent to a spool file, but that just creates a point in time. If the job is active and you send it to a spool file, then it freezes at that spot. Active job logs are viewed normally. You can find them in, work job. You can find them in Navigator for I, work with active job, and you can also find them in SQL with this kind of a select statement, select message ID, etc., with a job name in here. Okay. For completed jobs, you can display them with SQL if the job log is pending, but if they've turned into a spool file, now you need to go look at spool file data instead. Okay, so still there. Here you're getting it out of the job, and here you're getting it out of the spooled file. So both options are available. Dealing with a large number of job logs, some people say I don't generate job logs because I don't like to have too many. And by default, they end up in this QEasy job log output queue. They are typically deleted every 7 days by the system cleanup program, so that's not a big deal. You can change that to a lower number if you want to. Again, we mentioned this 4.0 no list, which says if a job completes normally, just don't generate one. That's a reasonable thing to do for a lot of jobs. And my favorite is set queue log output to star pending. So when you do that, job logs don't get generated. They don't show up in QEasy job log. They're disconnected from the job, and I just find them with work job log instead. Much nicer, or with the SQL. The vast majority of job logs won't ever be read, we hope. If there's somebody in your staff that's targeted, and your job is to read all the job logs, I feel sad for that person. The job started, ran, and ended, and if it didn't cause an error, and it's a normal thing, that no list is okay. It's key to have a job log when you have problem jobs or things that are important, like startup jobs and backup jobs. And the history log plus QSysOper will help us find them, and then reviewing the job log helps us to get in there. So, question I see in the chat is, how do you clean all those pending job logs? Hey, you don't have to, because after 7 days they go away. So, or the system cleanup time. So they disappear automatically as if they never existed. So that's really cool. We've got a message that somebody's getting a query cannot be run. I want you to bring that to the Q&A, because there's a whole bunch of reasons possibly that could happen. And it may be a simple thing in your job settings. All right, well, thank you very much for attending. Hopefully you learned something. For those of you looking for those SQL statements, those will be available in the presentation once you've done the survey after the end of the conference. We'll send you links to be able to display or download those PDFs.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much, Larry. This was such a great session. We hope you guys enjoyed it. There is another session right now beginning. So if you want to head back to the lobby and join one of those, we'd love to see you there as well. And then our Q&A time will be at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So if you have any questions, feel free to bring them. And if we didn't get to any here as well, we will add them to the list that we have going. We hope to see you guys in the next one. Thanks so much.
Thanks all. See ya.